But our main story, Zack Snyder's Justice League, we'll do non-spoilers first, briefly, and go hog wild and just do full spoilers after that, and we will put that in the description and let you guys know when we're transitioning to spoilers.
Terrific. Dylan, to start this off, why don't you give us, because I know kind of the history of Justice League and why the Snyderverse or the Zack Snyder cut happened.
Yeah.
But, I think that you can probably summarize it a little bit better. So do you want to give us a summary?
Sure, yeah, I'll do that as best I can. So if you guys in the audience remember or don't, basically, Zack Snyder has started out as kind of the main creative driving force behind DC's movies for a little while. He made Man of Steel, he made Batman vs. Superman, and he was making Justice League. Batman v Superman and Man of Steel were both, I would say, received with mixed to negative perception, and I kind of align with that too. And a lot of things kind of happened at once. Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide during the production of Justice League, and also Warner Brothers was not happy with the direction his movies were going. So as a combination of those things, Snyder stepped away from the project. When Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon, who wrote and directed The Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, Firefly, and a bunch of other stuff. At the time, that seemed like a sensible move, like he kicked off the Avengers universe and stuff like that. But obviously, as we've learned in recent months and years, Whedon kind of sucks. Like, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Who, and part of this came to light because of Justice League, because of what we talked about in an earlier episode with Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg in this film, about the allegations of just horrible behavior and abuse on set by Joss Whedon and prejudice that Fisher faced as a result of Whedon's behavior and Jeff Johns, who is a higher up at Warner Brothers, or at DC, sorry. So, so Whedon came over and made Justice League, and Justice League came out, and I don't think anybody liked it because it obviously upset fans of Snyder. It upset everybody else because it was just like a bad Frankenstein's monster of a movie. You could tell there were parts that were the original version that felt very Snyder, and then there were Whedon moments. And Whedon has a very specific style of comedy and dialogue, and it like they don't work together. Snyder's and Whedon stuff just does not work as part of the same movie. And so ever since then, Zack Snyder's fan base has been campaigning with #release the Snyder cut, because Snyder had alluded that his cut of the movie, which essentially means his edit, was out there. It was shot and done, and it just was going to sit on the shelf for forever. Whether or not that is a fully true statement,
right.
I do not think it is, because there was definitely more stuff shot for this movie. But basically, the idea was let Zack Snyder film his vision and release it. And so that group has some really positive elements about it and some negative ones. Like, they raised a lot of money for suicide awareness and prevention, but a lot of them also just harassed people at Warner Brothers, like mourning the death of family members or celebrating birthdays. Their Twitter replies would be just swarmed with #release the Snyder cut.
Wow.
And to Zack Snyder's credit, in an interview when this was coming out, he distanced himself from Geeks and Gamers, I think it is, and they're like an alt-right geek group, or they linked to alt-right ideologies online. And he was kind of addressing that in relation to the shooting that happened this week, where a white terrorist shot up several Asian people. So Zack Snyder was distancing himself for that and saying there's no room for hate, which good on him. Stop Asian hate. Another side note. But this movie probably exists as it does because HBO Max and Warner Brothers saw an opportunity to create a massive content draw. So they let Snyder come back, make his movie as he wanted, and release it. And so now we're here. Sorry, that was almost 8 minutes of me talking.
Hey, that's not a problem. It's such a complex story. I completely forgot the whole part about his daughter's suicide, Zack Snyder, and that's
why it says for Autumn at the end. Autumn was his daughter.
That makes a lot more sense now. Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it just kind of existed that they fired him. So, it's good to have that kind of recap and get a lot more of that information in there.
I think it was. I don't remember the exact details. It's gray. It's like he was kind of fired, but also was stepping away to take personal time to because his wife was also heavily involved in his productions. So I think as a family, they needed to heal as much as you can from something like that. But yeah, that's the story of the movie. So let's
spoilers. Why don't we talk about
let's talk about the movie
itself.
What did you think of this movie, Niles?
I when I watched the original Justice League, I remember not much of it, honestly. It's kind of a forgettable film, like you were just saying. Like I was just kind of watching the original Justice League just to get it over with. It was just kind of like I just wanted to watch the movie. It wasn't like something that like I was really looking forward to. It was just something that I do appreciate these characters like Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman and the Flash. They're all terrific. Like I grew up with DC comic characters, so I still wanted to see the movie. But I remember the original one being very underwhelming, and this one definitely was not. It was kind of like the Zack Snyder fan, wet dream essentially. Like it's it has everything that you really want. You got like some good character
from his
development
movies.
For, like,
you mean
for superhero movies. It's I feel like it hits the ball right where it needs to go into play. It's not like necessarily a home run, but it's still an awesome fucking play for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. This movie has almost all of the problems I have with both Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. I still am a fan of Snyder's portrayal of Superman specifically, and also Batman. He made a Batman that kills people and shoots guns, which are to me very fundamental misunderstandings of that character. I know Batman has killed in comics before, but the no guns, no killing thing to me is an important part of Bruce Wayne's character, so it's disappointing to see that persist in his version. But setting that aside, because you kind of have to, this is what you're getting, I enjoyed this movie a lot, and I'm shocked I enjoyed this movie as much as I did, because I really, really do not like Snyder's previous two DC movies. I was going to watch them before this, and I sat down to put on Man of Steel, and I just couldn't watch it. I was like, I just don't like it. I don't like it. And Batman v Superman is even worse. And I hate his Lex Luthor. I hate so much about what he did in the movie. But this movie is a monumental improvement on Joss Whedon's Justice League, like night and day, which is so interesting because the basic plot is the same. There's more of it, and also, I don't think this is a spoiler, but the plot beats are the same, but the emotional core of this movie, the Snyder Cut, is Cyborg. And Cyborg is great. I have never given a shit about Cyborg, but he was so cool in this movie. And it really shines a light on the shittiness of Joss Whedon because Cyborg is an afterthought in Joss Whedon's Justice League, and that it really just illuminates exactly what Ray Fisher has been talking about. Holy shit!
I'll agree. It was definitely a big improvement, and I would agree that the emotional core is like Cyborg, and to a lesser extent you could also throw in the Flash there, but not. Yeah, he's definitely not like the emotional core of it.
No.
But it was definitely an improvement. But let me ask you this though: would you think that this movie was necessary? Given that there's already a Justice League film out there, was it entirely necessary to release this cut or no?
Well, necessary, not really. I mean, I had emotionally moved on from this series. But that being said, I'm glad this movie exists because it's an infinitely more interesting version of this movie. And I would think initially like this might cause some problems because maybe people want to see more of Ben Affleck's Batman, but we have Robert Pattinson's Batman coming up. But DC is leaning into the multiverse stuff pretty hard. Even on the CW TV stuff, they had their Crisis on Infinite Earths, like and the Flash movie, if that ever actually comes out, is bringing back Michael Keaton's Batman. So it's like you can have a multiverse stuff, like of the stuff going on. You can have these different versions of characters existing. So I think it wasn't necessary. The franchise was kind of moving beyond these versions of the characters anyway, but I think now maybe they'll revisit that and keep some threads going from this. I think there's interesting potential for where this leaves off, which we'll talk about more later. I don't want to see Snyder's weird, mopey portrayal of Superman anymore, though. I want Superman to be Superman. But what do you think?
Yeah.
Think it was necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of along a similar line of your opinion, where it's like, yeah, I've definitely emotionally moved on from this movie. I think at this point, I'm far more invested in Marvel than I am DC. I think that's just kind of the name of the game, and especially since Marvel's just been killing it so consistently.
Their track record is so much more consistent.
Yeah, they're so much better than DC, and that's just kind of like a statement of fact right now.
As close to fact as you can get. Like they're more universally praised, I would say. They are more well liked in the mainstream than the DC movies are. Regardless of your opinion on Marvel or DC, that's all valid, but you can't contest that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is immensely popular, and that is due to its success at its formula.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, was this movie necessary? Excuse me. If they want to continue to expand the DC universe and make other movies, then yes, I think this movie was definitely necessary because we'll get into it later, but it definitely sets up potential for a sequel. It sets up a lot for the continuation of the DC universe. So it's this movie was definitely necessary if they wanted to continue down that road and continue to make other DC movies where it could be the Nightmare scenario or whatever. They could even explore Injustice stuff, but that's way off in the future if they ever wanted to do that. But they had to. This movie definitely feels like it was a necessity to set up any kind of future franchise that they want to have.
Yes. Okay, that's fair.
This was also just kind of a note that I had because this movie is 4 hours long. It is a monster to get through. I watched mine through 2 days. I think that you did a similar viewing
I did
schedule,
as well.
Dylan. So I just kind of had this question right off the bat. Would it have been wiser to separate this movie, maybe into 2 different films or something like that? Kind of separate out a little bit more, kind of like Infinity War and Endgame was for MCU.
I actually don't, because I intended to watch. I went into the movie intending to do 2 sessions, over 2 nights, because I didn't think I was going to like it very much, and 2, I didn't have 4 hours straight to really spare. But I started it Thursday night, and weirdly enough, I wasn't having a problem with the pacing, and I kind of wanted to keep watching. I got through the first. I got to the point, and this is a spoiler-ish thing, but it's in the original cut too. I got to the point where they were coming up with their plan to bring back Superman, and I wanted to keep going, but it was 11 o'clock on a work night, and I still had an hour and 40 minutes of the movie to go. So I'm like, okay, I gotta stop. And I just don't think there's a really good spot in this movie to cut it off and make it 2 films. Infinity War and Endgame are 2 halves of the same story in a lot of ways, but Infinity War ends. It has an ending. And Endgame picks up next. So it is a 2-part story. It's not a story told in 2 parts, and the Justice League is not.
Totally. Yeah. And if you did want to separate this out into 2 films, you would have to rewrite the entire fucking thing. You'd have to figure out, do we want it to be mainly focused on Steppenwolf? Do we want to bless you? Do we want to have Darkseid in the second movie and him have to be the second villain? It would be a lot of rewrites for sure.
And I think the best move would be to. I would have to watch it again to really critically assess all of this, but you could probably cut out a good 45 minutes of this and it still function. But I could be wrong on that. Maybe everything was more essential. But I feel like there was there was some fat that you probably could have trimmed to get this story down. Not all the way to what the theatrical version was, because that was shy of 2 hours, which, seeing this full story play out, that's just an embarrassing decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this was meant to be an epic, like a massive epic film, and it is that. It's not the best thing ever, and I think it misses the mark in some ways, but to be that level of epic, I do think you need a longer running time to really get the feel.
Absolutely. And I mean, when I was watching this, it definitely, like, I had, like, flashbacks to, like, 300, or, like, Sin City, where it's, like, lots of slow motion, lots of, like, slow building, like, epic conversations where it's like, oh yeah, one line, like, that kind of stuff. And so it did feel very epic because of, how Snyder shot it.
It's the most Snyder of his 3 DC outings, for sure.
Absolutely.
Because Man of Steel, his style is completely absent. Batman v Superman may have a little bit more of it, but it's not like the speed up, slow down 300 Watchmen or 300.
Yeah.
So, but
fair enough. So I mean, before we dive into spoilers, I guess one thing that's like kind of, or at least stuck out to me in this film was just like the CGI improvements. Like, do you have any thoughts on the CGI improvements? And because Steppenwolf looked a lot more badass. Superman had his black, outfit on this time.
Yeah.
Spoiler, sorry.
Yeah, I think. Well, one, I think it benefited because they didn't have to CGI off Henry Cavill's mustache. None of the footage was being shot during his filming of Mission Impossible 6.
Yeah.
Which is such a funny story that had to happen. But
right.
Yeah, I think Steppenwolf initially, when it was first revealed in that picture, what he was going to look like, I just rolled my eyes because it looked so over-designed. But in motion, it worked, I think. And he had a look, unlike in the theatrical Justice League where he was just big gray man.
Yeah.
I liked the color of his armor, how you could see it sometimes. I liked how it moved around.
Yeah, I liked how it was kind of alive and stuff. He definitely looked a lot more intimidating in this one. Like, sure, in the original one, he's still a force to be reckoned with, but he's just kind of a big bad guy, like the big gray bad guy that you were just talking about. So I think he definitely looked a lot better in this film, and that, made me feel like a little bit more intimidated, maybe. I don't know. Like, it just made him feel like a better villain overall.
Yeah, and we'll talk about more in spoilers, but I think just his character in general is much improved in this. And that has to do with spoiler elements, so we'll save it for, like, why he's better, I think has to do with his motivation, which is more spoilery, so we'll talk about it.
Should we just